and ask the critical question about the South African economy. You'd remember a couple of years ago, I think it was about 10 years ago or 15 years ago, President Mbeki at one of his State of the Nation address said, much criticism and acclaim, depending on where you stand, that South Africa is two nations, one poor and black and one white and rich. And of course, people are there to kill him for that, to say this is racist and what have you. Has the economy changed in color? Has it changed significantly since that observation by President Mbeki, that in fact if you examine it closely, poverty would be afflicting more of the black population while the rich are getting richer? Of course, the world has told us already we are the most unequal society in the world. Is that racialized or not? We're going to I want to ask my guest, Dr. Ellis Roots, who is the CEO of Strategy for AfriForum, Dr. Sibongiseni Vilakazi, who is the chairperson of the Black Management Forum in Gauteng, and the president of AMCU, Joseph Mathunjwa, to weigh in on the debate ahead of the budget vote, but also to talk a little bit about what we should be doing with this country's budget to be able to lift people out of poverty. What triggered the conversation partly was that in December last year, the Minerals Council, which is, to say the least, a white-dominated organization of mining companies, white monopoly companies who are running mines, to put it in blunt terms, writes a letter to the chairperson of Transnet and says, Portia Derby, who is the CEO of Transnet, must be fired summarily. In fact, that's in the first paragraph of their letter. They are saying that they have lost confidence in this CEO, and she must bugger off, basically, immediately. And then the Black Business Council wrote a scathing letter accusing that mining council of being anti-transformation, a code for being anti-black, right? And that's where I want us to start our discussion. Are we seeing that racial stratification of economic debate in South Africa, the economy itself? And I'm going to ask you, Dr. Villa, welcome, by the way, gentlemen, lady, thank you for being here. We don't take it for granted. We respect your time a lot. Thank you so much. Dr. Villa, let me start with you. Can you just weigh in immediately on that? We will come to the generalities first, but weighing in on this example, right? Is it what we are seeing now in terms of how the economy is structured, in that it is still very much polarized, right? So you've got a group of CEOs, maybe 50% or more than 50% of them, heading up mining companies, white-owned mining companies, general or foreign-owned, some of them. And then on the other side, you have a parastatal, which is a government entity, essentially, right? And they seem to be at loggerheads. And then, of course, the BBC coming in and saying, this is racial, this is anti-transformation. Your view on that issue, just deal with that example as an illustration of the bigger problem we have.
Yeah. No, thanks, JJ, for the opportunity to be here representing BMF. We do agree with BBC. The statement that BBC puts out, that this is an attack essentially on transformation, because it's quite bizarre that the Minerals Council would come out and accuse a CEO who's only been in a position for 24 months, and she came in that position with a clear mandate to transform the organization because it was ailing. I mean, we do agree that the performance of Transnet is quite beneficial for the country. We need Transnet to be performing at its optimal pace. Yeah. But there's a historical issues that have happened to Transnet that have gotten it to be where it is. And Portia was brought in for exactly the reason to turn it around. And I think the Mineral Council understands this very well, because they've even worked quite closely with the board of Transnet to assist with the operational issues there. So for them to turn around now and say that they've given Transnet 24 months to deal with the issues, and nothing has been done, and therefore the CEO, both Portia and Sizakele, are incompetent, and they are failing to turn around, when Portia specifically has been there 24 months. And so if they're saying that they've given them 24 months, so she's been there for 24 months, and she came in to turn it around.
Yeah. No, that's saying she failed in 24 months.
In 24 months, like, how does that happen?
Does she need longer than that to turn around Transnet?
I mean, honestly, like any turnaround specialist will tell you, you do need some time to get the ball running and for people to buy into you. And if you look at the decisions that she's made in the 24 months that she's there, I wouldn't be in a position to say that or conclude that this person is failing, because in that 24 months we've seen that they've managed to decrease the wage bill from 58% to 51%. Jobs have been lost. That it takes a brave leader to make those kind of decisions. And sometimes they do go against the unions to be able to say,
so let me interrupt you there. But the Minerals Council seems to be addressing a skills issue, because on the second part of their letter, they say that they want industry experts to be parachuted into Transnet to help her.
And that's exactly the point. That's why we are saying, as BMF, agreeing with BBC, that this is an attack on transformation. Because for them to say that they want industry specialists who've been retired and to be brought back to assist, what does that say? Who is most likely a person who's been retired to come back and assist? It's most likely a white male. And I mean, if you go into who manages the council, 25% only is women. It's a woman. So, I mean, it tells you this is a bunch of men who realizes that this woman is quite serious about transformation. I mean, if you see some of the measures that she's put in place, she's unapologetic about the transformation that needs to take place in the mining industry. And they clearly are finding it difficult.
Before I give the other panelists a chance, I mean, is all their suggestions, are all their suggestions completely out? For example, they're saying, let's have a war room, where industry and government can be in a place where they can then, in a sense, attack this crisis that has befallen the rail.
No, it's not out. It's a valid suggestion that can be made, and they've been part of trying to assist. They've had. That's why they even asked for committees with the board and management to assist. So they've been part of the solution. So for them now to come out like a month after they've suggested this collaboration with Transnet, to come out now and say
it has failed.
It has failed. Like, what time? You haven't given it a chance to do what it needs
Let's park that. I want to come a bit later, because there was another organization called the Rail Association something that seemed to agree with the Mining Council, and it is not particularly led by white people. It's actually for ordinary, I think, the rail or whatever associations that also said it's a mess. The wheels are coming off. We'll come to that now. I don't know how much, Dr. Ruzio, followed this particular debate. It's not specific to Transnet. If you look at other parastatals, there's always been this nervousness about privatization. When you say this thing is not working, let's bring privatization. No, you are privatizing because now you want to bring white people by the back door to come and run these things. What's your view about this? I'm sure this debate is you have engaged with it many times. Transnet is merely an example. You can comment on that, but give me a broader idea about whether or not you think that there's still a racialized way to that the South African economy is being approached.
Yeah, well, maybe a short reference. Her last day in the House of Commons, Margaret Thatcher was accused, one of the opposition members of Parliament said to her that, yes, maybe the economy has grown under your leadership, but that doesn't change the fact that the gap between rich and poor has gotten bigger. And she responded and she said that your problem with this argument is you would rather have the poor be poorer, provided that the rich is less rich. And I think that's the problem here. I think there's not much of an argument to be made about whether privatization would be better. The issue here is that it's about power, and it's about holding on to that monopoly. And so there's this aggressive push or shift or move, however you want to frame it, not to allow this monopoly to break, regardless of the consequences. And the consequences of maintaining these monopolies is destructive, and we can see these consequences all around us.
Are you saying that the Mineral Council is justified to say remove the CEO. I mean, I mean, they're in the private sector. They want to tell government who must head up a parastatal. I mean, that's a reach coming from the Minerals Council.
Yeah, well,
nobody can tell the mines who must be the CEO of the mines. Even government that regulates them would never say to them, appoint so-and-so, don't appoint so-and-so. It's different to say, fix 1, 2, 3. But to specifically, they're not joking here. They're not saying, please fix the management. They're saying this one must go.
Yeah, well,
how can we allow that?
No, government should not be telling the private sector how they should run their affairs, but the private sector should be telling the government.
Why?
Because the government is elected.
Why?
The government is elected by the private sector. The government is elected by the people, and in as far as the people...
Government is elected by the people, so why would private sector tell the people how to govern themselves?
No, the private sector also represents the people. The people are the sections of society that are not in government, that vote for government, and they start their own businesses and their own companies outside the realm of government, and that is the private sector. So there's nothing, without going into the details of this particular case, there's nothing wrong with a private company criticizing a government decision or criticizing the way...
No, they're not criticizing. They're saying remove this CEO and put another one.
Yeah, well, if they are tax-paying citizens, I'm sure they have a right to comment on what they think ought to be done. They don't necessarily have the power to remove the CEO, but they can take a stance.
They seem to think they have the power. The way they wrote the letter, they are not asking. They're telling government, remove this person.
But they're not removing the CEO because they don't have the power to do that. Government has the power.
All right. Well, after the break, I'll give Mr. Mathunjwa to weigh in on that. Stay tuned. It's a Debate Tuesday here on Power to Truth. Stay tuned. I'm speaking truth to power and conducting conversations that build. Of course, tonight's conversation ahead of tomorrow's budget vote is about the economy. Is it racialized? How are we going to fix it? Of course, my panel will weigh in later on about what we should really be doing with the budget of the country ahead of that very important budget tomorrow. Tate Mathunjwa, your comment on what the two panelists have said, right? Do you think that there is still a very stark racial, if you like, stratification of the economy in a way that we approach the issues that relate to fixing this economy?
Yes, I think good evening to your viewers and your listeners and to the panel present. One should start by saying, are we surprised if the lady in question is being instructed to leave her position? I mean, if the credit rating agencies, which is dominantly a Western organization, can instruct the president of the country to leave his position as a president. I mean, we cannot even be doubtful to say the former state president Zuma, who removed him, was not me and you. So now, what about the CEO? On whose economy that, I mean, is regulating or, I mean, is functioning? We don't have any economy. I think the question will be how many of the South Africans today, this evening, are prepared to agree that is not yet Uhuru. We are not free. We don't own any economy here. So we are being empowered on someone's economy. So they've got the fullest right to do it because we've got nothing. We just have this facade of black government without anything. Even during the Nationalist Party, surely Dr. Roots can agree with me, the economy of the country was run by Mineral Energy Complex. Who is Mineral Energy Complex? Those are the people, the Anglo-American, the Oppenheimers, you name them. Those are the people who are running. So, I mean, we cannot cry foul and say, we black, we are being discriminated. We haven't created any economy except the sweat and the blood of our fathers and our brothers. That's what our labor, that is what we sweat for, to open this. But in the real sense, who's owning the economy is not us as South African, it's foreign owned. So therefore, why should we cry foul when people, they are doing their own things, I mean, on what belongs to them, so to say. So if they were able to remove the former state president, Jacob Zuma, within 24 hours, and the following day he was no longer a president of the country, so who is the CEO at the end of the day?
So I said the NEC of the ANC was instructed by the by
it
the
goes
West.
without saying. Who's running the country right now? Who are the advisors of the government? It is not a credit rating agencies. It's not those that you see in the presidents. You think they are advising, the sitting state president. No ways. It doesn't work like that. They are just a facade.
Well, we seem to be in trouble. Do you agree with that? I mean, have we lost our sovereignty where the economy is concerned because of powers that are bigger than the country?
You know, if we were to take the story of South Africa since 1994,
yeah,
and we make a movie of this story,
yeah,
and you watch that movie backwards, it's a very inspirational story, because it tells the story of a government that persistently abolishes destructive policy ideas while increasing electricity and water supply, while improving service delivery, while growing the economy, while moving the country closer towards genuine non-racialism. And then towards the end, they adopt this great constitution, they win the World Cup, and the story ends with a big national election, a national democratic election that gets a standing ovation from the entire global
Your point
community.
being?
The point is that ever since this government came to power in 1994,
yeah,
they've been moving backwards. They have persistently implemented destructive policy ideas. They have seen the graphs indicating that the demand for power supply and water and so forth is increasing, but they did not respond to that by increasing electricity supply and water and so forth. So we've had a regression in terms of service delivery and all of these things. So we can talk about the problems in this country and who should we blame and all of that. And sure, there are other role players who have also done some horrible things.
There's nothing that you think since 94 has improved one way or another, despite that it may not be perfect.
Well, since 1994, I'm struggling to think of ways in which race relations has not improved, the economy has not improved, electricity has not improved.
You don't think race relations have improved?
Since 1994? Yeah. No, I think, remember the hype we had in 1995 about race relations, people were hanging each other. I should add that I don't think race relations in South Africa is quite as bad as the government would like us to believe. I think on ground level there are fairly good relations between white and black people. I don't experience racism when I walk down the street. I don't see racism when I walk down the street. You see it on social media. But the complaints and the concern about racism is much bigger now than it was 10 years ago. So in that sense, there's not been an improvement.
Okay, I'll come back to you. Do you think, can you just address the issue of institutional racism? Because he doesn't see it walking down the street. But I'm sure there is it's somewhere subliminal. It's because he has already said it's gotten worse. Yeah. He just said he may not see it on a day-to-day basis.
Well, I think there has been improvements. I mean, for us to say now it has gotten worse will be, I think we'll be denying some of the gains that we've made. I mean, the fact that I've had the opportunities that I've had as a black woman, for instance, speaks for itself. I wouldn't be here. 10 years ago, it would have been a different conversation to be having. So we can't say nothing has happened, it hasn't gotten worse. Yeah. But obviously, he wouldn't see it because he's a beneficiary to the privileges. The only people who would see that racism is still real and alive, and it requires leaders who are clear about what it will take to make the differences that need to be taken. That you don't need to be popular. For as long as you are in a position where you want people to love you, and especially certain group of people to put a pat on your back and tell you that you are doing well, you will not take this country forward. So we do need the likes of Portia who will make the difficult decisions to say we will open up space for emerging.
He's saying as citizens, the business has a right to say she must be removed.
No,
specifically.
Obviously, they will say that we expect resistance. So it's part of growth. People, when you do the right thing, you expect that people must resist. So the fact that they are resisting means she's doing the right thing, and it means that some of us who support what she's doing, we need to rally behind her and not make them feel that they are alone.
But what do you say about that rail association? Can you put them in the same category? Because they're also saying the rails are falling apart. Transnet
No, but
they call it a catastrophe.
No, but it is a catastrophe, and I think that's why she was brought in. I don't think she was brought in because everything was working so well, and we just needed someone to just move everything the way it has been moving.
Yeah.
No, things have broken apart, and that's why she was brought in to turn them around. And she's put forward a strategy that the board seems to be happy with. That strategy.
Yeah.
She's been implementing that strategy. Only 2 years into the strategy, actually I would even argue it's 1 year, because she probably spent the 1 year putting together what needs to be done. So it's only been 1 year into it. And looking at the decisions that have been made up to now, she's implementing the strategy. So why would now someone come and say, you have failed and we have lost confidence in what you can do, when the strategy has been approved by stakeholders, I'm sure, have been supporting it. And only when after she made it very clear that the contracts that are ending in April will be replaced by people who don't look like the norm. Suddenly, no, we don't want you. You are making wrong decisions. Because she's made it very clear that we need to open up space for emerging miners to come in. 7 additional miners, emerging miners to be exact, and that seems to be too much for certain people.
Yeah, let me, Mathunjwa, please link to that, because there are people who are saying the unions have made the situation worse, right? And your union may not be there, it doesn't matter. Just speak in general about labor. That in 10 years' time, in 10 years, right? There's never been a strike at Transnet, right? And there was a strike now that cost the country 50 billion rand, on top of all the problems that are there in Transnet. What would you say about that? I mean, is that a fair criticism to the unions that there wasn't an attempt to avert a strike that would cost that much to the country?
I mean, workers always, they find themselves right in the corner at the end of everything. So everything that is pushed is about profit and having a hope that the caring government will look after them. I think it comes to the point whereby they are saying we have to go on strike. The cost of living, it's high. We cannot even afford basic things that we should, be able to buy because of what? Of the inflation, because of the budget of the government, which doesn't put more money, in the pockets of the workers. So therefore, every time when people, they fail to do their work, they always blame labor. And when the labor, is asking for better increase, always you will be taken to court, just to dislodge you in terms or to bail yourself out of the agreement. So you can't blame workers because...
Yeah, but Middle Council seem to be criticizing Transnet to say you failed to talk to your workers to a point where you now had a collapsed economy for that week, whatever, many days, which resulted in 50 billion loss for the whole country.
I think I'll be in a wrong position really to comment much about the relationship at ESCOM. At
Transnet.
At Transnet. I think I'll be a misguided missile if I will really talk about what's name.
All right. When I take a break, after a break, I want us to then go and say, given all that you have said, right, do you believe that the way the budget is structured, it still reinforces these polar positions in the country about where money is spent, what resources are spent? For example, there are people who are arguing that if you look at a city like Cape Town, that where the DS always bragging that this is the best city in the world and what. When you go to black communities, it's not where they spend most of our money. But actually recently, just 2-3 days ago, they say, no, in fact, that's where we spend most of our money. Of course, it doesn't show in the streets as you walk with water pipes bursting and fires for shacks and what. But I want you to comment on that after the break. We are going to focus after the break on the budget that's coming up tomorrow. Given what we have discussed here, do you think that the budget is still, in a sense, reinforcing all patterns of inequality? Or is it giving us a bit of hope that these may change? Stay tuned. Tomorrow, people are wondering, would that money tomorrow be used to prop up state-owned enterprises or to leave them desperate so that they go and get private sector funders, right, to come and save them? There's also a narrative that says, these parastatals are being destroyed to a point where there will be no choice but to privatize them. Will you weigh into that? Because that's a key thing about how the economy is going to be driven going forward.
Let's go back to the lady, the CEO lady that was asked to be removed.
Yeah.
The reason for Portia is...
Portia Debbie, yeah.
Yes,
The CEO of Transnet.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear because deliberately they broke down, the railway into maybe 3 segments, whether was PRASA, Transnet, and that other one. So now the lady came in to fix it.
Yeah.
Of which he comes to fix something that is not supposed, which was deliberately broken down as they are heading to ESCOM. So now they want to revenge, the lady want to revenge the wheel. So now they broke down the rail to make easy for the privatization to take over. Yeah. And now they are gunning for ESCOM. That's why you are hearing them saying, the president saying, there will be a distribution, there is a transmission. They are breaking down, same as they did with rail. Anyone who will come to ESCOM to fix it as a state-owned enterprises to run, he will never last even 48 hours. Because it's not the agenda. The agenda is to give the white monopoly capital, all the SOEs on a silver platter, as you see with the SAA. Where is SAA today? You prefer private sector, to take over your airline, your heritage, your legacy to private sector. For the private sector not to have a competition, of which all these SOEs are what we call it, is a social wage. It's a net for the poor of the poorest, of which the private sector should compete with the state, but the state dismantling what is supposed to be beneficial to
Dr.
us.
Vilakazi, isn't there a space for public-private partnerships, given that the problem is so big, right? It's big, it's too big to be handled just by government or just by the private sector. Surely the privatization cannot be such a scarecrow.
No, definitely. Government cannot do what needs to be done just as government. There's a space for government, there's a space for private sector, and there's space for civil society. So everyone needs to play their part in order to make the country to work. And in this case, Portia is not, or at least Transnet, they're not saying that we are privatizing. They are saying that we need an investor to come in and assist, because there's no money. Like, realistically, there is just no money for Transnet to be able to assist with the corridor line from Johannesburg.
But is there a danger of the private sector taking over, like Dr. Mathunjwa
No,
saying?
because there are clear guidelines put in place, and they are saying it's only for 20 years. So it's not privatization. It's to say, come in, we share the profits, and we also share the risk as private sector. But most importantly, you bring in the money that Transnet doesn't have or government doesn't have. Bring in the money, bring in the expertise that are needed to ensure that the operations are effective. For a set period of time, only 20 years. And after that, you bring it back to government. For me, it sounds like a very innovative idea that should be supported.
There's a tweet here that I must ask you whether the BMF is failing to influence that story, right, or the narrative, even if you take that case study of Transnet, because, you know, the president of the Minerals Council happened to be the former BMF president. So why are you guys now sort of unable to lobby her to be able to understand your point of view around this matter? I mean, she's the one who signed this letter, long letter to Transnet. Well,
as a mineral
and along with others there, she's not the only black person in the Minerals Council.
Yeah, I mean, as a chairman of the Mineral Council, she's representing a specific stakeholder. And unfortunately, when you represent your stakeholder, you do.
But if we try to lobby her, that's what I'm asking.
We've tried.
You tried and you failed.
We've tried, and we're still in conversations to make sure that we get to a common understanding of what needs to be happening. But she is not there as the former president of the BMF. She's there as the chairman.
When you finish BMF, you throw away the values of BMF.
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. But
so why do you say this statement? I mean, we know she's no longer there, but I'm saying this is your entry point into transforming that industry, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's the advantage we have as BMF, to have that kind of.
Does it look like that's the advantage you have, because they still proceeded to say these things that are atrocious anti-transformation? Quickly, before I give us Dr. Rhodes.
Yes, I mean, the problem that I picked up, the doctor, she's saying the government will enter into an agreement with the private sector for 20 years, irrespective of the material condition. So no, you are not saying, but the agreement will be, they want a guarantee for 20 years. So if the conditions change, we will be putting money there, irrespective of what conditions are changing. So why should the government give its own responsibility to the private sector? If the private sector wants to build their own rail line, let them compete with the state. The rail is not meant to make business, to make profit. It's not. If you look back in 1820, Netherlands and Belgium, where when they separated, they used what to build their economy was through rail industrialization, where you interconnect, where people are using a cheap way of traveling, and secondly, to build their own economy. So if we are not aware, the country will be run by the private sector. Because of our failures.
You don't think that's a bad thing? That the private sector should actually run the government.
Let me just give a quick introduction to my answer. So Apple Computers, as we know it today, is the biggest company in the world. There was a time when they were on the verge of bankruptcy. They were about to file for bankruptcy. And the CEO at the time, who presided over the slide towards bankruptcy, then famously said during a meeting that this organization is a sinking ship with a big hole in the bottom, and my job is to get everyone to row in the same direction. And then someone said to him, well, that's good, but what about the hole? And that's the South African dispensation and the South African economy as a result of that is like this sinking ship with a hole in the bottom. And the crew and the captain is arguing with the passengers about the color of the varnish, and they're trying to get us all to row in the same direction as if there's not a hole. But the problem with this thing is they want us to row back into the iceberg that created the hole in the first place. That iceberg is government monopoly combined with black economic empowerment, combined with entitlement ideology, combined with cadre deployment. So we seem to be arguing that we would rather have dysfunctional government monopolies than functional private, than to privatize and to turn these dysfunctional institutions into functional institutions.
But shouldn't there be a balance? Can you dismiss black economic empowerment? So if you subtract that, what would be in its place other than proceeding in a straight line as if 1994 didn't happen? You just address that part, because it's going to color all the conversation.
No, the issue is not that that black people should not be empowered. When I say black empowerment is the problem, I'm saying the policy of BEE as it is being implemented today, because it does not incentivize skills development, it does not incentivize education. We have one of the worst education systems in the world. We're not.
It actually incentivizes skills development, because it instructs companies that otherwise wouldn't bother to upskill their people, to say you got to spend 3% of your money to upskill people. Surely that's an incentive.
No, it claims to incentivize skills development, but what it does in reality is it incentivizes contracts that goes to companies that belong to people who are friends of the government. And it incentivizes putting people into positions.
But by the way, the private sector has managed to ignore that. If you look at the section of BEE that talks about employment equity, a latest report by both the Department of Labor and a similar report 10 years before by KPMG says that over 70% of new appointments and 7% of new promotions were to white people. So white people are the biggest beneficiaries of BEE.
No, but you know what's the problem? We don't have it's not so much an unemployment problem as it is an unemployability problem. We have...
Oh, they couldn't find black people. That's why they are 70% white.
They couldn't find people who have the correct skills. And now I'm really generalized, because we have to... if you have a situation where you have to make a decision on who should be appointed in a particular position, the correct answer is appoint whoever is the best skilled person to do the job, regardless of the color of the skin.
But don't you think it's strange that a report like that, after 30 years, right, can come out that
no,
in
it's
fact,
not strange.
Despite affirmative action policies, which you say are bad, right, they were, after all, ignored by the private sector. So what's the problem? The private sector just carried on as if nothing happened.
It's not strange that poverty is a bigger problem in black communities. It's perfectly understandable if we consider that, and I'm quoting Statistics South Africa, who have said themselves that the dysfunctional schools in this country are the schools in black areas. The schools that are working are the schools that are regarded as white schools. So what's happening in this country is the average white child gets a better education than the average black child.
How do we change that?
Well, we should fix the education system. You can't have this sprinkle of icing on top of a cake that's not properly built or not properly baked. So we cannot try to fix, we should have the right people and count the skin colors of the people when the whole thing is rotten at the bottom. The issue isn't fixed on ground level. We have masses of black people who are unemployed, who did not finish school, who came from dysfunctional schools even if they finished it, and now we're trying to talk about who should be CEO of the company when we're not fixing the actual problem.
Dr. Vilakazi?
I actually agree with them on that, because everyone in society has to play their part.
Yeah.
So it's not one or the other. Everyone has to play in unison. So when you have parents who, because of a system that has been designed to make sure that they're not at home to be looking after their children and making sure that they're doing their homework at a time when it's supposed to be done, because they have to work somewhere far and they take long to get home. Yeah. You can't expect that a society like that will function as normal as the society that he's describing, that the schools in that society are functioning well. So the system has made sure that it has to function well. The parents are there, they can attend, they can be part of the what is it?
School governing
bodies. Yeah. They have the time to do all those things. And then you have a community of people who are constantly running to make sure that they are providing
and
the
they
basics.
Survive.
Yeah, and they survive.
Go through a river to go to school.
Yeah, so it just makes sense that that's what you will find. So everything has to work in unison. So they do have a point. He does have a point when he talks about that some of the reasons why we find ourselves where we find ourselves at the senior level is because the basics have not been put right. So we do need to focus on the basics, but not for the same reasons that he's arguing for them.
Yeah.
For the other reasons, that it's a system that has been created to make sure that it keeps people in that space. But we need leaders who understand that and who will have the bravery to change things. And when you do have that bravery to change things, you will be blamed.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, for instance, if I can close the point we started with Portia.
Yeah.
For the mining sector to say, or mining council to say that she's incompetent and she's failed. I mean, it goes back to the point you were saying, that we need capable leaders and all of that. Can you honestly, in your heart of heart, and say that Portia has failed and she's not the right person for the job and all of that? No, you can't say that, because she has put in place what needed to be done to turn around Transnet, and yet you still have a body that is a powerful body that is threatened by what she's doing, and therefore saying, no, we can't have this. We need to maintain status quo. So it's the same everywhere, even in the schooling system, that when you have teachers and a community of people who want to do things the right way, and a government that is supporting them, people like you who prefer the status quo to remain the way it is.
I don't prefer the status quo.
You come
all right, after the break, I want to ask all of you, how can the budget be used as an instrument to change all of these things you talked about? Right? Yes, you can laugh, but can it even, scratch the surface in changing us our lot, right? Given what we have discussed here tonight. After the break, we round off the conversation, a debate with my panel. Stay tuned. Let's round off the conversation. The debate tonight is about the economy and where it's going. Do you think the budget can be used, right, as an instrument of change? And if that were to happen, what would be the 2 or 3 big things that would have to be decided out of tomorrow's budget?
I'm under no illusion.
Oh, no.
I'm telling you that there will be anything that will change the lives of the majority of the poor of South Africa in tomorrow's budget. These people, they are, as I've said it, they are being advised by the credit rating agencies. Those are their advisors. There will be no money that trickles down to the poor of the poorest in terms of education, changing the education, put more money in the education, in health system and everything. It will be austerity budget, which will result in a poor service delivery. There will be no increment for for public servant, of which they need to be paid. The IMF will tell them that we've got no money, instead we have to cut. And if the government cuts, in terms of the budget that's supposed to go to people, then we are telling there will be no service delivery. And the fiscal policy of this country, I think, is more neoliberal than anything else, because it's where the government should pump money to build, economy, macroeconomy, based on their fiscal. But if that money is not going to be pumped in the bulk infrastructure, employing people, creating employment, and then said, no, the private sector will do, it cannot be. So the budget of tomorrow should be focusing more on the people of South Africa. We don't want grants, undirected grants. People want jobs. 350, what can you do? If you can take all this 350, times millions, and create a sustainable, employment, surely people, they can earn more than 350. But tomorrow's budget, it will be another grandstanding, a fashion show of some sort that will never help.
But is it not a sign of the times in terms of the world economy deterioration? In other words, can South Africa be expected to be in a bubble of prosperity when the rest of the world is falling apart around us in terms of the war that's happening there and depression everywhere?
In as much as, yes, there are those external influences, but from ourselves as South African, what are we doing in terms of our economy? How would you address unemployment in this country where you are shipping all your minerals, to be beneficiated outside? No industrialization, nothing that is happening. The food that we eat, we import. The clothes that we wear, we import. Everything we import. There is nothing that we manufacture in this country. So how then we'll be able to address unemployment in this country? Will remain.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's nothing we manufacture, but Dr. Vilakazi,
what is it? No industrialization, no textile. Everything is from China, is from Asia, is from Europe. Everything that we eat, every brand or whatever that you do, you get here, is not owned by South Africans. So how can you grow the economy? How can you address unemployment? These neoliberal economic policies that are run by this government is pushing this country right at the edge of the cliff.
Okay, my God. It sounds like Sodom and Gomorrah stuff.
No, it's bad, but I don't think we should have a helpless attitude. We shouldn't just
throw our hands in the air
and say nothing can be done. I think there's a lot that
what can be done through the budget as an instrument.
The budget for me is not really the answer. South Africa does not have a money issue. That where do you spend the money? I think we always allocate our monies appropriately, but sometimes we even return that same money back to Treasury because we just don't do what needs to be done. So for me, it's the problem is even bigger. Yes, we expect the minister tomorrow to allocate appropriately, but the real problem is having leaders who actually care and they want to see their community, the communities at least that they come from, to be thriving and doing well, and also to be bringing on board those civil society organizations to assist. The solutions don't lie with the leaders that we've elected, unfortunately.
So you are calling for a regime change?
For me, that's what needs to happen. It's not even regime change, but it's more of a conscious change.
Consciousness.
Change. That everyone needs to start understanding what role do they need to play in making sure that this.
So the budget is to. You shouldn't pin our hopes on that this budget will do something.
It's money that is being allocated. It's money. It's never. Our problems have never been money. Our issues are not finance where money is being allocated. No, our issues is where is the leadership taking us to? What he's saying right now with manufacturing, everything that we eat, wear, and live.
The public servants don't agree with you because they went to the street saying they are not being budgeted for, and in fact, in the last mini budget, the minister decided that whether they like it or not, they'll only get 3%. Dr. Ruth?
Yes, so I think in as far as the problem is an ideological problem, it's not so much new liberalism as it is the combination of race nationalism with socialism. The thing with a budget is a budget can be very destructive very quickly, but a budget is not really an instrument that can fix the problem. The best a budget can do is to make sure that destructive policies or ideas are not funded and that it opens up to private sector and to communities to do the work that needs to be done to grow the economy. A government cannot grow the economy, and there's not been a single example in world history of a people or a nation that got wealthy or successful as a result of politics. The only way to do that is hard work, skills development and savings. But the problem is if you have government policies that prevent people from doing these things, that's what ought to be.
But which government policy prevent people from doing these things?
Well, firstly, the whole government approach towards monopoly, getting government monopoly, preventing the private sector from becoming involved, combined with
yeah, but this particular government is bringing private sector everywhere.
No, not everywhere.
I said in the airline.
No.
Everywhere.
So
clean the toilets.
Government monopoly is a massive problem. And then when there's talk of privatization, the response is, oh, you're bringing in the private sector to just take over everything.
Yeah.
South Africa is extremely centralized in terms of government, much more than the impression you would get if you read the Constitution.
Yeah.
The only sustainable solution would be to decentralize power, to have a government that has much less power, that is weaker and deliberately so that communities can be more empowered, can have a bigger say over what happens, over the rules that are applied to their own community, so that they can make their own rules, so that they can move forward.
So tomorrow is a non-event?
No, it's not a non-event. The budget is important. But it's mostly important for the reason that it should not be a bad budget. There are some government decisions and fiscal decisions that they should take. In as far as the government, the budget takes us closer to privatization and farther away from government monopoly, it's a good budget.
All right.
But that's not going to fix the problem.
But in short,
the budget tomorrow, they must pump more money to the municipality. The reason why I'm saying this, we are about 30 million unemployed people in this country. So the same municipal must get money from the people, and the people are not working. So how would you sustain the infrastructure in the municipality? And you will see this government, you will never do that.
All right. But Dr. Vilakazi, last parting show, of course, the last word.
Yeah, I think the budget, we welcome it. We'll see what comes out of the budget. But the most important thing is that we need leaders who are bold and who are not afraid to make the decisions that need to be made, whether popular or not popular.
All right. Parting shot?
If the government does not allocate a single rand to anything, and it says we're going to open up the economy, we're going to deregulate the economy, the consequences are going to be
I want to leave it there. Gentlemen, ladies, thank you for your debate tonight. We hope that we will have you again to continue these conversations.